Step into a room where the walls do not answer you. There is no echo waiting in the corners, no small return of your footsteps, no familiar softness of sound bouncing from ceiling to floor. The air seems to swallow every movement before it can become part of the room. Even your own breath feels unusually close, as if it has been moved from the background of life into the center of your attention. At first, this sounds like the beginning of perfect peace, a place without traffic, without voices, without humming machines, without the restless electrical murmur of modern life. But the deeper the quiet becomes, the less empty it feels. You begin to notice the small sounds of your mouth, the shift of clothing, the pulse inside your ears, the faint movements of a body that is never completely still. This is one of the strange truths about silence. The closer we come to it, the more it changes shape. In a laboratory, silence can feel almost unnatural, built from insulation, steel, concrete, and wedges that catch sound before it returns. In the natural world, quiet behaves differently. It breathes, drips, rustles, freezes, widens, and travels across the earth. There are places where sound becomes rare, softened, delayed, or transformed. Some are made by human engineering. Some are shaped by trees, snow, stone, desert, deep water, or the long distance between one living thing and another. Each place seems to ask the same quiet question in a different way. So what are we really searching for when we search for quiet? Are we looking for the end of sound, or for a place where the world can finally be heard without being covered? The first sensation is not silence. It is the missing echo. In an ordinary room, sound comes back to you almost before you know it has left. A footstep touches the floor, travels outward, strikes a wall, and returns as a faint confirmation that the room exists around you. A cough, a whisper, the scrape of a chair, even the movement of fabric against skin. All of it returns in some softened form, inside an anechoic chamber. That familiar return is gone. The walls are not flat walls in the usual sense. They are covered in long, pointed wedges, arranged like the inside of a strange geometric cave. Their purpose is simple and severe. They catch sound, slow it, break it apart, and prevent it from bouncing back toward the listener. This is where the search for the quietest places on Earth begins. Not in a mountain valley or a deep forest, but inside a human-made chamber in Minneapolis. At Orfield Laboratories, an anechoic test chamber has been measured at levels so low that ordinary intuition begins to fail. It is often described as the quietest place on Earth. Not because the Earth naturally made it so, but because people constructed it to remove nearly everything that gives sound a surface, a path, or a return. The word anechoic means without echo. It is a calm word for an unsettling condition. To live in the world is to live among echoes, even when we do not notice them. We understand rooms by how they answer. We sense distance by how sound comes back. A hallway, a bedroom, a cathedral, a subway station, a forest path. Each one sends sound back in its own way. The echo tells us where we are. When that echo disappears, the body loses one of its quiet maps. The eyes may still see walls, floor, and ceiling, but the ears receive almost no confirmation. A sound leaves the body and does not come back. The mind expects the world to answer, and the world remains still, at first. can feel like relief. No engines outside. No neighbors moving behind a wall. No air conditioner. No refrigerator. No traffic pressing faintly against the edge of awareness. The usual hum of modern life has been stripped away so completely that the room seems to offer a kind of purity. Then the quiet turns inward. With the outer world diminished, the body steps forward in attention. The listener may notice breathing, not as background, but as an event. The small wet sounds of the mouth, the shift of joints, the faint movement of clothing, the pulse that seems to gather somewhere inside the ears. The body, which usually hides inside the noise of the world, becomes audible. Extreme quiet reveals a contradiction almost immediately. The quieter the room becomes, the harder it is to find emptiness in daily life. We often imagine silence as a blankness, a clean space where sound has stopped. But the chamber teaches something more intimate. When the world becomes quiet enough, silence does not feel blank. It is filled by the listener. The human body is an ongoing condition of motion. Air enters and leaves. Blood circulates. Muscles adjust. The ear itself is a living instrument, sensitive, adaptive, and always searching for information. Even stillness is not the absence of activity. It is activity made smaller. In this way, the quietest room begins to resemble a mirror. Not a mirror for the face, but for the nervous system. It reflects almost nothing outward, and because of that, it reveals what was already happening within. A person inside it may begin by listening for the room, then slowly realize that the room has almost nothing to say. What remains is presence. This kind of quiet did not emerge from a monastery or a remote landscape. It emerged from measurement. Modern life depends on sound being controlled. Engineers need to test microphones, speakers, hearing devices, vehicles, appliances, aircraft parts, phones, and countless other objects that make noise, transmit noise, or respond to noise. To understand how something sounds, they must reduce the confusing contribution of the room around it. They need an environment where the object can be heard without echoes, without outside interference, without the invisible coloration of ordinary space. In an ordinary room, sound is never alone. A speaker does not merely play music. It plays music into walls, windows, corners, furniture, carpet, wood, plaster, and air. A voice does not exist by itself. It blooms in one room, hardens in another, disappears in a padded studio, and lingers in a stone church after the mouth has closed. The chamber removes as much of that partnership as possible. Thick layers keep outside noise from entering. Heavy construction blocks vibration. Springs or isolation systems may separate the chamber from the building around it. The interior wedges reduce reflections so that sound does not gather into echoes. Each part of the design serves the same purpose: to make the room stop participating. That may be the strangest thing about engineered silence. It removes not only noise, but response. A normal room is social. It participates in every sound made inside it. It answers footsteps, receives speech, sharpens or softens music, and gives the listener a sense of surrounding. The anechoic chamber is almost antisocial. It does not answer. It does not comfort the ear with resonance. It allows a sound to end almost as soon as it begins. Long before such rooms became famous as places of curiosity, they belonged to a serious history of listening. At Bell Labs in the 20th century, engineers and researchers built anechoic spaces to study sound with unusual precision. The goal was not to frighten visitors or test endurance. It was to understand hearing, loudness, speech, microphones, telephones, and the behavior of sound in an age when human communication was becoming increasingly technological. To build a better telephone, one had to understand the voice. To understand the voice, one had to separate it from the room. This is one of the hidden histories of quiet. Much of the silence we engineer is not created for rest. It is created for control. The laboratory needs quiet so that sound can become data. The manufacturer needs quiet so a product can be tested. The architect needs quiet to understand how a space will behave. The audio engineer, the hearing researcher, the aerospace designer. All of them need rooms where the ordinary world can be reduced. The quiet room is not an escape from technology. It is one of technology's instruments. Yet once a human being steps inside, the instrument becomes an experience. What was built for measurement begins to test perception. The visitor enters a chamber meant to isolate sound, and instead discovers how deeply sound is tied to balance, orientation, comfort, and self-awareness. We do not usually notice how much the world helps us feel present. There is a faint reassurance in background noise. A distant road tells us that life continues beyond the room. A fan gives shape to time. Voices in another apartment remind us that other bodies are nearby. Birds outside a window mark morning. The refrigerator hums, stops, begins again. Even unwanted noise can become a kind of acoustic weather, a low surrounding condition that tells the mind it is not alone in emptiness. When that condition disappears, the mind must adjust. This does not mean that extreme quiet should be exaggerated into myth. The room is not a supernatural trap. It does not need dramatic claims to be interesting. Its strangeness is quieter than that, and more revealing. It shows that hearing is not only about detecting sound. Hearing is also about locating oneself in space. It is about expectation. It is about the small exchange between body and environment. A sound leaves us and teaches us where we are by returning changed. When that return is missing, the world feels less available to the ear. The body becomes more available instead. There is a kind of sensory loneliness in that. Not emotional loneliness exactly, but the loneliness of a voice without a companion in the room. A clap does not bloom and fade in the ordinary way. A footstep does not tell a story about the floor and the walls. Even silence no longer feels shared with the surrounding space. It feels private, almost bodily. This is why the anechoic chamber is such a powerful beginning for a journey into quiet. It gives us the most extreme version of one idea, then immediately complicates it. If silence meant only the absence of external sound, this room would bring us close to silence. But the experience inside suggests that silence is never simply outside us. It changes with the body that enters it. A room may be quiet, but a person is not. Outside the chamber, the building continues to exist with its ordinary sounds. Doors close somewhere. Air circulates. Machines run. People speak. Vehicles pass beyond walls and streets. But inside the chamber, those sounds are reduced until they no longer dominate attention. A small human-made pocket has been cut away from the planet's usual acoustic life. That pocket is astonishing, but it is also unnatural. On Earth, sound usually travels through contact. It touches surfaces. It moves through air, water, wood, stone, leaves, walls, and bodies. It is shaped by everything it passes through. Even a quiet landscape is not a place where sound ends immediately. It is a place where sound belongs to a pattern. Wind in grass, rain on needles, insects in dusk, water beneath ice, birds hidden in a canopy. The chamber interrupts that pattern. It removes the give and take. It creates an environment where sound has no landscape to move through, no living field in which to settle. If the quietest human-made place feels strange because it removes too much, perhaps the quiet we long for is not the disappearance of sound. Perhaps what we want is not a dead room, but a more faithful world. A place where the sounds we hear are not constant intrusions. A place where attention can widen instead of defend itself. In the chamber, quiet narrows inward. It brings the body close. It makes the listener aware of pulse and breath. A physical life usually folded away beneath traffic, conversation, climate systems, devices, and routine. This can be fascinating, but it is not quite the same as peace. Peace may require more than the removal of noise. It may require a sense that the world around us is still present, still alive, still answering in some gentle way. That is why the search cannot remain indoors. The anechoic chamber teaches what happens when humans build silence by force, by insulation, absorption, isolation, and measurement. It teaches that echoes are not merely acoustic accidents, but part of how we feel the world around us. It teaches that the body is waiting beneath every layer of external sound. But it cannot teach what natural quiet feels like. For that, the room must open. The wedges must fall away. The concrete must give way to soil. The silence that consumes sound must give way to a quieter condition, where rain touches moss, birds call through green distance, and the absence of machines does not make the world empty. It lets the world speak. A door opens. An ordinary sound returns. Air moves in the hallway. A footstep finds a floor that answers. Somewhere. A machine gives off its low mechanical breath after a room where sound had no return. Even a quiet building feels crowded with response. To understand another kind of quiet, we have to leave that sealed absence behind. We have to leave the wedges, the concrete, the careful instruments, and step into a place where silence has never meant emptiness. Imagine entering the Ho-Rain forest on a damp morning beneath the deep canopy of Olympic National Park. The path is soft underfoot. Moss climbs over fallen trunks and hangs from branches in long green veils. Ferns crowd the forest floor. The air is heavy with moisture, and every surface seems to hold water, not as a sudden event, but as a long condition of being here. At first, you might call the forest silent. There is no traffic close enough to dominate the ear. No refrigerator hum, no elevator cables moving behind a wall, no layered city noise pressing constantly against attention. The familiar mechanical fabric of modern life has thinned until something older and subtler can move forward. But the longer you stand there, the less silence seems like the right word. Rain touches leaves in thousands of small impacts. Drops fall from one branch to another, delayed by moss, needles, and bark. Somewhere in the green distance, a bird calls from a hidden place. The sound does not break the quiet. It belongs to it. This is the second lesson in the search for the quietest places on Earth. A forest can be quiet because it is full. Its quiet is made by balance. No single sound overwhelms the others for long. Water, wing, leaf, insect, soil, and air all take their places in a living arrangement. And the ear slowly learns that quiet can be a form of order. In the anechoic chamber, Sound was stopped. In the forest, sound is received. The trees do not erase the world in the severe way of acoustic wedges, but they soften it. Leaves scatter sound. Moss absorbs footsteps. Uneven ground interrupts hard reflection. Rainfall becomes both sound and veil, filling the air with a fine texture that makes distance feel intimate and close. The forest does not refuse to answer. It answers gently, in layers. That is why natural quiet can feel more restful than absolute quiet. The body is not abandoned to itself. The ear still has surroundings to read. There is space, depth, direction, weather, and life. The listener is not trapped inside the private noise of the body, but placed again among other presences. A quiet forest allows attention to widen. At first, the mind listens for the obvious sounds. A bird, a breeze, a branch moving somewhere above. Soon the ear begins to notice smaller differences. Rain falling on broad leaves sounds different from rain falling on needles. Water in a narrow channel sounds different from water dripping from moss. A bird call nearby feels sharp and bright, while another farther away dissolves into the green. The place becomes a slow education. Modern noise often arrives as a sheet. It covers what lies beneath it. Traffic, aircraft, generators, leaf blowers, engines, ventilation systems, and the distant roar of highways can flatten the ear's sense of detail. They do not merely add sound to a place. They make it harder to separate one sound from another. In a quiet forest, detail returns. This is part of what people mean when they speak of natural soundscapes. A landscape is not only what can be seen, it is also what can be heard. And what can be heard depends on what is allowed to remain audible. The shape of a place exists in sound as much as in light. A forest has an acoustic architecture, even if no one built it. The canopy forms a ceiling, but not a solid one. The trunks rise like columns, but irregularly, each interrupting and scattering movement through the air. The ground is soft, layered with needles, leaves, mud, roots, and decay. There are few flat surfaces, few hard plains, few clean lines where sound can strike and return unchanged. Everything is textured. A hard city street throws sound back quickly. A glass wall returns it sharply. Concrete, metal, stone, and asphalt create a world of reflection. The forest receives sound into roughness. It breaks sound into smaller pieces. It allows noise to lose its edges. Even the air seems to listen differently. Moisture changes the atmosphere of hearing. Rainforest air appears to hold sound close. It does not create the exposed silence of a desert or the enclosed quiet of a cave. It creates a soft nearness, as though the world has lowered its voice without going still. This is why the Hoh rainforest became so important to modern conversations about quiet. It offered a place where natural quiet could be named as something real, not merely a romantic mood. The quiet there was not perfect, and it was not guaranteed. Aircraft could still pass overhead. Visitors could still speak. Roads and machines could still intrude, but in its best moments. The forest made audible a living order that many people had forgotten how to hear. The phrase 1 square inch of silence carries that idea in miniature. It suggests that quiet might begin in a small, protected point, a place so carefully respected that the surrounding world would have to listen differently around it. Sound, of course, does not obey human boundaries so neatly. Noise can travel. A jet can cross miles of forest in a few minutes. A road can send its low presence into valleys and trees. Still, the image is powerful because it understands something essential. To protect one small point of silence, one must think about the air above it, the roads around it, the machines beyond it, and the habits of people who may never stand there. A quiet place is always connected to a larger world that can either shelter it or disturb it. The forest teaches this without argument. You may be standing among ferns and moss, feeling as though the modern world has fallen away. When a plane passes high overhead, at first it may be only a faint pressure. Then it grows into a recognizable line of sound, a metal thread moving across the sky. It does not need to be loud to change everything. The forest waits beneath it. Rain continues. Water falls. Birds may pause or continue. Leaves move. But the listener has changed. The attention that had opened outward into the living soundscape now tightens around the intrusion. For a moment, the sky is no longer empty distance. It is a route. When the aircraft fades, the quiet returns, but not exactly as before. Now the listener knows how easily it can be crossed. Natural quiet is no longer just a peaceful condition. It becomes something vulnerable, something dependent on decisions made far beyond the trees. The forest may be ancient in feeling, but its silence is modern in its uncertainty. A chamber can be sealed, measured, controlled, and maintained. Its quiet depends on design. The forest's quiet depends on relationships. It depends on weather, distance, animal life, human restraint, flight paths, roads, visitor behavior, and the health of the ecosystem itself. It is never created by one condition alone. It is a living agreement because it is alive. It is never still in the same way for long. Morning has one sound. Afternoon has another. Rain changes the acoustic fabric of the place. Wind rearranges the canopy. Birds establish territories. Insects rise and fall with temperature. A stream may be quiet in one season and insistent in another. The forest is not a silent object. It is a changing voice. This changing quality gives natural quiet its depth. It rewards patience. A person who walks quickly through the forest may hear only rain and birds. A person who stops may begin to hear direction, distance, intervals, and patterns. The ear adjusts, not because the place becomes louder, but because attention becomes finer. Something similar happens emotionally. At first, quiet may feel like relief from noise. Then it becomes curiosity. Then, if one remains long enough, it can become a kind of humility. The forest is not performing for the listener. It is not trying to soothe. It is simply continuing its own life. And the listener is allowed, briefly, to hear a small part of that continuation. That may be why forest quiet can feel less lonely than the quiet of a chamber. In the anechoic room, the absence of response turns the body into the main event. In the forest, the body becomes one listener among many. Birds are listening. Elk are listening. Insects are responding to vibration in air. Small mammals move through understory. Water follows gravity through root and stone. The quiet is shared. It is also practical for the living world. Sound is information. A bird call can mark territory. A twig breaking can signal movement. Rain can hide or reveal. The absence of a predator's sound, or the sudden presence of an unfamiliar noise, can matter. What humans experience as atmosphere may be part of another creature's daily map. This does not make the forest peaceful in a simple way. Life inside it is full of hunger, mating, warning, decay, competition, shelter, and survival. A quiet forest is not a gentle fantasy. It is a functioning place. Its calmness, to human ears, comes partly from the fact that its sounds are integrated into the ecology that produces them. The sounds fit because they come from the place itself. A waterfall can roar. Thunder can shake a valley. Wind can tear through branches with a force that fills the whole forest. Yet these sounds still feel different from the steady mechanical insistence of engines, because they arise from the same world the listener is trying to hear. They reveal the place. Rainfall tells us about canopy, leaf, branch, soil, slope, and season. Birdsong tells us about territory, presence, and distance. A stream tells us about elevation and movement. Wind tells us about height and exposure. Even the creak of trees can make the forest feel more physical, less like scenery and more like a living structure. This is how the forest becomes quiet, because it is alive. It does not erase sound. It arranges sound into belonging. It gives the ear enough variation to remain interested, and enough softness to rest. It allows attention to move slowly from one layer to another, without being forced, startled, or overwhelmed. For a listener used to the pressure of modern noise, that can feel almost miraculous, not because the forest lacks sound, but because it does not demand attention in the same way. It invites attention. It lets the mind choose a sound and follow it. Rain for a while, then a bird, then the hush of leaves, then the faint shift of one's own breath among the breathing of the place. After the chamber, this feels like a return to the world, but it is not a return to noise as we usually know it. It is a return to sound before domination, sound before it becomes a constant background stress, sound before machinery fills all available space. The forest offers a glimpse of what quiet may have meant for much of human history, not the disappearance of the world, but the ability to hear where one was. That ability is becoming rarer, even in places set aside for protection. The acoustic world is not sealed. A park can protect trees from logging and still struggle to protect the air above them. It can protect animals from hunting and still expose them to engines, aircraft, road noise, and visitor sound. It can preserve what the eye sees while losing part of what the ear needs. The forest, then, is not only a refuge, it is a warning. It shows what quiet can be when life is allowed to speak in its own proportions. But it also shows how little it takes to disturb that proportion. A single aircraft, a nearby road, a group of visitors carrying city habits into a place that cannot absorb unlimited intrusion. The quiet survives, but it survives conditionally. The search must continue because forests are only one answer. There are other places where quiet is made not by moss, leaves, rain, and living balance, but by the shape of the land itself, beyond the green enclosure. Stone rises, snow falls, craters open, caves darken. The world begins to show that geography, too, can become a kind of acoustic room. At the edge of a crater, silence feels exposed to the sky. There may be no moss beneath your feet, no damp canopy above you, no green layers catching the rain before it reaches the ground. The world has opened into rock, altitude, wind, and distance. Quiet no longer gathers around leaves. It begins to come from shape. A landscape can behave like a room. Not a room with doors and windows. Not a room made for human comfort. But a space that gathers, absorbs, blocks, scatters, or releases sound according to its own design. A crater can hold quiet inside its walls. A cave can make a single drop of water feel enormous. Snow can soften an entire village overnight. A canyon can carry a sound farther than expected, then hide it behind stone. The land has acoustics, even when no one planned them. Quiet is not always made by distance, and it is not always made by life. Sometimes it is made by form. Stone, ice, elevation, enclosure, slope. And weather can shape sound as surely as any wall in a laboratory. The anechoic chamber showed a silence built by human hands. The forest showed a quiet held in living balance. Now the question shifts again. What happens when the earth itself becomes the structure that shapes listening? One of the most powerful places to feel this is a crater at Haleakala, on the island of Maui. The land rises until the world below seems to have fallen away. The summit is not merely high. It is set apart. The air feels thinner. The light can seem sharper. Clouds may drift far below. And the crater opens in a vast basin of cinder, ash, and volcanic color. A person standing there may feel as though they have entered a room without a ceiling. The quiet is not soft like the forest. It is spare, immense, and strangely clean. There are no dense leaves to catch the sound, no thick rain to fill the ear, no city surfaces throwing noise back in quick fragments. There is rock, distance, altitude, and open air. Sound behaves differently because the world is arranged differently. Elevation can separate a place from many ordinary sources of noise. Crater walls can shield parts of the landscape from surrounding sound. Bare volcanic ground may not echo in the way a hallway echoes, but it still changes how footsteps, wind, and voices are heard. Even the absence of nearby vegetation matters. Nothing rustles unless the wind finds something to move. The quiet feels spare, but not empty. The crater has its own sounds. Wind moving across exposed ground, small stones shifting underfoot, distant birds, the faint movement of people if people are present. Yet the scale of the place makes each sound feel temporary, almost fragile against the larger stillness. In the chamber, silence closed around the body. In the crater, quiet opens outward. It does not trap the listener inside themselves. It places the listener under a sky so wide that sound seems to have less to hold on to. The mind responds to that openness. A whisper may feel appropriate not because anyone has forbidden speech, but because the place seems to ask for proportion. A loud voice does not belong easily to a crater at dawn. It feels too small and too forceful at the same time, as if human sound has misunderstood the scale around it. Some landscapes teach restraint without saying anything. Canyons teach it differently. In a canyon, the land does not open evenly. It cuts downward. Walls rise on either side. Sound can travel along stone, bend through corridors, vanish behind turns, or return in broken fragments. A voice may seem close, then distant. A falling rock may announce itself with surprising clarity. A river far below may fill the space with a steady sound that feels both present and unreachable. The canyon is a place where hush and resonance live beside each other. Some corners may feel deeply sheltered, protected by rock from roads and wind. Other places may amplify sound. Sending it across distances, the eye understands, but the ear has to learn. A canyon can hide the source of a sound while making the sound itself travel. This is where the ear begins to understand a place in 3 dimensions. A trail may seem remote, The view may appear untouched, but sound does not follow the same boundaries as sight. A machine far away can become audible because stone, air, and distance happen to carry it. A bird hidden behind rock can seem close. A river out of sight can still organize the entire valley. Before the conflict of human noise becomes central, it is worth staying with the quieter lesson. The shape of land changes the shape of listening. A wall of rock can block wind. A bowl of earth can shelter the air. A ridge can separate one valley's sound from another. A cave can remove the sky entirely. Snow can transform a place not by enclosing the listener, but by changing the ground beneath every sound. Few changes feel as sudden as snowfall. A familiar street after fresh snow can seem to belong to another world. Cars sound farther away. Footsteps lose their hard edges. Voices do not strike the pavement in quite the same way. Trees hold white along their branches. Rooftops grow padded, and the world seems to have been covered not only in brightness, but in quiet. This is not imagination alone. Fresh snow is porous. It contains tiny pockets of air. Instead of reflecting sound sharply like concrete or hard ground, it absorbs part of the sound energy that reaches it. The result is softening. Edges blur. Distances feel altered. The familiar acoustic world is briefly rewritten. Snow makes quiet visible. You can see the reason for it lying on the ground, gathered on railings, resting in branches. The world has not moved farther away, yet it sounds farther away. The same houses, roads, trees, and fields remain, but their surfaces have changed. Sound meets a different kind of world and returns differently. This is one of the gentlest examples of geography as acoustics. The quiet after snow does not feel engineered, though the principle is related to absorption. It does not feel like the forest, though it also softens the world. It is temporary, weather-made, delicate. A plow can break it, sun can harden it, footsteps can compress it, rain can erase it, but for a while, the entire landscape becomes a listening chamber. Inside that chamber, people often lower their voices, perhaps because snow seems to have lowered the voice of the world first. There is something intimate about that kind of quiet. It does not require remoteness. It can arrive in a town, a suburb, a field, or a city park. It shows that quiet is not always hidden at the edge of the earth. Sometimes it appears overnight, when the atmosphere, temperature, and ground briefly agree. Snow also reveals how unstable quiet can be. It depends on conditions. Too little snow, and the effect may be faint. Wet snow behaves differently from dry snow. Crust, ice, slush, wind, and traffic all change the soundscape. What feels like magic is also physics, and what feels timeless may last only until morning. Caves offer another transformation. To enter a cave is to leave behind the open exchange between land and sky. The air cools. Light narrows. The outside world weakens with every step inward. A cave can be quiet because it is insulated by stone, hidden from wind, distant from surface noise, and separated from the everyday movement of weather. But a cave is rarely mute. A drop of water may fall from the ceiling and strike stone or a shallow pool. The sound can seem larger than the drop itself, because darkness removes visual distraction, and the enclosed space gives the sound a body. Footsteps become cautious. Breathing becomes more noticeable. A voice may return from rock in a way that feels old, delayed, almost unfamiliar. Here, quiet is concentration. The cave gathers attention around small events: a drip, a scrape, a breath, a shift of loose gravel. In the forest, the ear moved among many layers of life. In the cave, the ear waits. Sound becomes occasional. And because it is occasional, each sound carries more weight. Stone has a different memory than moss. It may reflect sound sharply in one chamber and swallow it in another. A narrow passage may make a whisper feel close. A larger cavern may let a sound linger. Wet surfaces, rough surfaces, open hollows, tight tunnels, and underground streams all shape what the ear receives. No two caves are acoustically identical. Some feel hushed and heavy, as if the stone itself is holding its breath. Others are alive with water, echo, bats, or underground rivers. The quiet depends on geology, moisture, size, entrance shape, airflow, and the presence or absence of living things. Even underground, silence refuses to become one simple condition. This matters because it keeps changing the idea of quiet. Quiet is not a single destination. It is a family of conditions. The chamber removes echo. The forest balances life. The crater opens sound into height and distance. Snow absorbs the hard edges of the world. The cave concentrates listening around small movements inside stone. Each place teaches the ear a different rule. The listener may begin to realize that quiet is always relational. It depends on what sound is trying to do and what the place allows it to do. A surface can return sound, soften it, scatter it, absorb it, or carry it onward. A landscape can make the same human voice feel rude, gentle, lost, enormous, or small. The world is constantly shaping what it lets us hear. This is why geography can feel almost intentional, though it is not. A crater was not made to quiet the human mind. Snow did not fall in order to soften a morning street. A cave did not form for the sake of echoes. Yet when we enter these places, their physical forms become part of our inner experience. The land changes the ear, and the ear changes the mind. A person walking across fresh snow may feel calmer because the soundscape has lost its sharpness. A person standing in a crater may feel small because sound no longer confirms human scale. A person inside a cave may become more careful because every movement seems to matter. These feelings are not separate from acoustics. They grow from the way sound and space meet. This is one reason quiet places often feel sacred, even when no formal religion is attached to them. Sacredness can begin as attention. A place changes the body's habits. Speech slows, footsteps soften. The mind notices its own volume. The world seems to ask that we enter it differently, not because the landscape has a will, but because its scale, sound, and silence make ordinary human noise feel out of proportion. Still, geography alone cannot defend quiet completely. A crater can be crossed by aircraft. Snow can be cut by engines. A cave can be altered by crowds, lights, walkways, and voices. A canyon can hold both ancient stone and modern noise in the same space. The land may shape sound, but it cannot always protect itself from the sounds we bring. That awareness begins to move underneath the wonder, if quiet can be made by snow. It can melt, if it can be held by a canyon. It can be broken from above. If it can live in a cave, it can be disturbed by every visitor who forgets to listen. The physical world gives quiet its conditions, but human behavior increasingly decides how long those conditions last. For a moment, stay with the land itself. Imagine the crater before sunrise. its vast interior waiting under a sky that slowly gathers color. Imagine a trail in the Grand Canyon where stone seems to hold both distance and time. Imagine a field after snow, every sound softened as though Earth has drawn a blanket over its own restlessness. Imagine a cave where the smallest drop of water marks the passing of centuries. None of these places is soundless. The crater has wind. The canyon has stone and air. The snowfield has breath, compression, distant life. The cave has water, rock, and the listener's own careful movement. But in each one, the world has rearranged sound so thoroughly that quiet becomes almost architectural. The lesson is subtle, but it deepens the journey. Quiet can be carved by stone, lifted by elevation, softened by snow, held by darkness, or scattered across uneven ground. It is not the absence of the earth. It is one of the earth's forms. Beyond craters, caves, forests, and snow-covered ground, there are places where quiet seems to come from sheer separation. No walls, no canopy, no chamber, no stone ceiling, only distance, dryness, horizon, and the long thinning of human presence. The next quiet is not enclosed. It waits in open space. Before sunrise, a desert basin can seem almost unfinished. The horizon is not hidden by trees or buildings. It lies open in every direction, thin and pale, as though the earth has been reduced to a few essential lines: rock, sand, salt, low shrubs, distant ridges, and the faintest suggestion of wind. There are places where quiet does not come from walls, trees, snow, or stone. It comes from distance. After the chamber, the forest, the crater, the cave, and the softened ground after snow. This kind of quiet feels exposed. Nothing seems to hold it. There is no canopy to filter sound, no underground passage to concentrate attention into a drop of water. There is only space, and the strange feeling that the world has moved far enough away for sound to lose its grip. At first, the silence feels almost complete. Then the ear begins to work. A small movement of sand near your shoe, a dry stem shifting in the air, the tiny sound of your own clothing as you turn. Far away, perhaps, a bird or an insect, so distant that the sound seems less like an event than a question. The desert is not silent, but its sounds appear one at a time, separated by large spaces of waiting. This is the quiet of distance. It is not lush like the rainforest. It is not enclosed like the cave. It is not padded like snow. It is not as controlled as the anechoic chamber. It is a quiet made by separation, by scale, by the absence of nearby human machinery, and by the long intervals between things that happen. In a forest, quiet is layered. In a desert, quiet is sparse. That sparseness changes the mind. When there are few sounds, each one becomes distinct. A footstep on gravel feels particular. A raven crossing overhead can seem to draw a line across the whole sky. Wind does not hide inside leaves, because there may be few leaves to carry it. It moves over open ground, sometimes barely audible, sometimes rising suddenly until the emptiness seems to breathe. Desert quiet is not always gentle. It can feel vast enough to make the listener aware of exposure. In a forest, there is shelter. In a cave, there is enclosure. In snow, there is softness. But in open desert, Quiet often arrives with the sense that nothing is between you and the horizon. The body has no easy place to disappear. It stands there, small and audible, in a space too large to answer. This is why distance can feel both peaceful and unsettling. Human beings are used to acoustic signs of nearness. A room answers us. A street surrounds us. A neighborhood murmurs. Even at night, the ordinary world gives off small proofs of company. A dog barking, a pipe moving in the wall, a passing vehicle, a door closing somewhere beyond sight. In the desert, those proofs may fall away. The absence of nearby sound makes the world feel larger, but also less socially familiar. The ear listens outward and finds almost nothing human to hold on to. What remains is scale. Scale has a sound. It is heard in the time between noises, in the way a distant engine can take a long time to arrive, in the way a voice does not easily belong to a wide basin, in the way a single stone knocked loose on a slope can seem to travel through more space than expected. When there is little else, distance itself becomes audible. A salt flat teaches this with unusual clarity. The ground may stretch outward in a pale, hard plain, bright under the sun, almost abstract in its simplicity, with few plants, few structures, and few nearby moving things. The landscape can seem stripped of the usual sources of sound. Footsteps may crunch or scrape against salt and mineral crust. Wind may move low across the surface. Between these sounds, a broad stillness opens. The ear begins to hear the horizon. Of course, the horizon makes no sound. But the mind senses the space between itself and everything else. Sound becomes a way of measuring absence. If something is far enough away, it no longer presses on attention. If the world is open enough, nothing nearby interrupts the listener's awareness of distance. In such places, quiet is a clearing. This is one reason remote landscapes have so often been associated with retreat, revelation, testing, and solitude. Deserts appear in religious histories, in journeys of exile, in scientific expeditions, in survival stories, and in myths of stripping life down to essentials. Their quiet is not decorative. It removes many of the distractions that soften ordinary existence. It also removes comfort. To say that a desert is quiet is not to say that it is kind. Heat can become punishing. Wind can become abrasive. The absence of water and shade can sharpen the senses in ways that have little to do with peace. The same openness that allows quiet can also make a human being feel unprotected. The quiet of distance asks the listener to accept scale without shelter. This is part of its power. A forest quiet gathers around you. Desert quiet places you inside something much larger than yourself. The forest says, "Listen closely." The desert says, "Listen far." Listening far is a different discipline. At first, the ear may search for detail and find little. Then, slowly, it becomes sensitive to intervals. How long since the last bird call? How far away is that faint movement? Is the wind rising? Or is the mind only noticing it more clearly? When sound is rare, time stretches around it. A desert morning can feel almost suspended. The first light arrives before the heat. Shadows lie long across sand and stone. The air holds a brief coolness that will not last. In that hour, small sounds carry a particular tenderness. The step of an animal, the call of a bird, the dry whisper of a plant, the breath of a person standing still. Then the day begins to widen. As the sun rises, heat changes the place. Air shimmers. Insects may begin their hidden work. Rocks warm. Wind may gather across open ground. The quiet remains. But it is no longer the same quiet. It becomes brighter, harder, more exposed. The landscape has not grown louder in the way a city grows louder, but the body feels more alert inside it. Quiet is never separate from the body that hears it. In a cold landscape, quiet may feel soft or crystalline. In a humid forest, it may feel close and breathing. In a cave, it may feel concentrated and old. In a desert, it can feel dry enough to make thought itself seem uncovered. The ear does not listen alone. Skin listens too. Breath listens. Thirst listens. Heat and light become part of the soundscape, even though they are not sounds. Remote reserves such as Namib in southern Africa offer one modern example of this open quiet. There, vastness is not only scenic, it is acoustic. Low human population, wide protected space, dry air, open terrain, and distance from dense infrastructure all contribute to a listening experience shaped by absence. The silence people speak of in such places is rarely absolute. There may be wind, insects, birds, animals moving at night, and human activity at lodges or roads. But the balance is different from ordinary life. The human-made layer is thinner. That thinness matters in many parts of the modern world, even when no loud noise is present. There is still a constant acoustic fabric made by people. Distant highways, aircraft, electrical systems, construction, machinery, air handling, industrial hum. It may be so familiar that people stop consciously noticing it, but the body continues to receive it. Remote places reveal what happens when that fabric is reduced. The mind may first feel relief, then uncertainty, then, with time, it may begin to notice forms of sound that were always too delicate to survive beneath the modern layer. A beetle crossing dry ground, the faint hiss of sand in a small gust, a wing beat, a far-off animal call at night. The quiet becomes less empty the longer one stays. In the desert, small sounds often arrive with long pauses around them. That is what gives the quiet its spaciousness. A forest may fill the ear with subtle continuity, but a desert often gives sound room to stand alone. Each noise becomes an island. At night, the quiet can deepen. The heat withdraws from the ground. Stars appear with a brightness that belongs to places far from city light. The visual darkness and the acoustic openness begin to resemble one another. Without traffic, without dense settlement, without the constant signals of a built environment, the night can feel wide enough to hold both awe and unease. A distant sound at night in an open landscape is different from a distant sound in a city. In a city, distance is crowded. Sound passes through many competing layers before it reaches the listener. In open desert, a sound may cross a much emptier field. It can arrive strangely clear. Even if it is far away, the ear may not know what made it, and the mind begins to imagine the space between. This is one reason quiet can intensify mystery. Noise can conceal uncertainty by filling the senses. Quiet gives uncertainty room. A faint call, a scrape, a shifting stone, a wind that rises and falls without visible source. All of it can make a remote place feel alive in ways that are difficult to name. The absence of obvious sound does not make the world simpler. It gives small signals more meaning. Still, distance alone is not enough. A desert beside a highway is not quiet in the same way. A salt flat beneath a flight path is not quiet in the same way. A remote basin changed by mining, drilling, tourism, or military activity can lose its acoustic spaciousness even while it remains visually vast. The horizon may still be open, but the ear may no longer be free to follow it. This is where the quiet of distance becomes fragile. It depends on remoteness, but remoteness is not a permanent condition. Roads reach outward. Engines travel. Aircraft cross what roads cannot. Generators arrive with camps and facilities. Visitors bring music, vehicles, drones, and the assumption that empty space is available space. A landscape can look unchanged while its silence has already been altered. The eye is easily reassured. A photograph of a desert may show no sign of intrusion. It may show only rock, sand, sky, and light. But a microphone might tell another story. It might catch the low approach of a plane, the faint roll of a distant road, the mechanical note of equipment beyond the ridge. Quiet is often damaged by things that do not appear in the frame. This makes acoustic protection especially difficult. People tend to defend what they can see. A forest can be visibly cut. A river can be visibly polluted. A skyline can be visibly altered. But quiet disappears without leaving a clear mark. When a sound passes, the landscape still appears intact. After the engine fades, the desert looks the same, yet the experience has changed. For the person listening, and for the animals living there, the interruption is not imaginary. It enters attention. It can mask other signals. It can alter behavior. It can remind the listener that distance is no longer quite as distant as it seemed. In this sense, deserts and open remote landscapes reveal one of the central pressures of the modern world. There are fewer places where distance fully protects the ear. Human sound travels with extraordinary reach. The road does not need to enter a basin for its presence to be heard. The aircraft does not need to land for the sky to become part of the noise system. A generator miles away can become a faint but persistent mark on the night. The modern world expands acoustically before it arrives physically. This is why the quiet of distance can feel so moving when it is still intact. It is not merely that the place is calm. It is that the place has not yet been completely claimed by the human soundscape. The listener encounters a rare proportion. Earth sounds, life sounds, and human sounds arranged in a way that does not place machinery at the center. In that arrangement, attention changes. A person may begin to walk more slowly. Speech may become unnecessary. The mind may stop reaching for constant stimulus and begin to settle into wider intervals. The silence does not entertain. It does not comfort in the familiar way. It gives the listener room enough to notice the size of the world. Perhaps that is why remote quiet has always carried a certain humility. To stand in a vast open place and hear almost nothing human is to feel the limits of human importance. The silence does not flatter us. It does not organize itself around our arrival. It was there before us, shaped by geology, weather, heat, night, animal movement, and distance. We enter it briefly, and if we are careful, we do not disturb it too much. Carefulness is becoming part of the story. A quiet place is not preserved by remoteness alone anymore. It may need policy, restraint, local stewardship, visitor discipline, airspace management, road planning, and a wider recognition that sound is part of landscape. It may need people to understand that a desert is not empty simply because it is open. Open places are often full of listening. The animals of dry lands listen for movement across bare ground. Birds listen across territories. Insects respond to vibration. temperature, and air. Predators and prey live by signals that may be brief and subtle, at night especially, when vision changes and heat recedes. The acoustic world can become a field of survival. What sounds peaceful to a traveler may be a working system for another life. That idea will grow more important as the journey continues. For now, it is enough to notice that even the quiet of distance is structured. It is built from spacing and intervals. It is held by the absence of nearby engines and by the presence of sounds delicate enough to require room. The desert teaches that quiet can be immense without being silent. It can be dry, bright, and unsheltered. It can leave the listener feeling both calmed and exposed. It can make a single sound seem precious because there is so much space around it. It can turn distance into an acoustic condition, something heard through the absence of crowding. Yet this kind of quiet has one great weakness. It seems protected by vastness, but it is not protected from above. A road must cross the land to enter it. A plane does not. An aircraft can pass over a canyon, desert, forest, or wilderness in minutes, carrying human noise into places that may have taken centuries to feel remote. It can turn the open sky into an invisible highway. And once we notice that, the search changes again. The next sound in the story does not come from the ground. It comes from overhead. The first sign is often not a roar. It is a faint line in the air. You may be standing in a canyon, a desert basin, a high forest, or a mountain valley where the world has settled into its own proportions. The wind is low. The ground is still. A bird calls once, then stops. For a while, the place seems to belong to distance, stone, weather, and time. Then something enters from above. At first, it may be too faint to name. A pressure more than a sound. A thin vibration at the edge of hearing. The ear turns upward before the eyes find anything. The sky looks open, blue, innocent. Then the sound grows, and the mind recognizes it. An aircraft is crossing the quiet. It does not need to be close. It does not need to be low. It may be too high to see clearly, a small moving mark in the sky, or invisible behind cloud and light. But the sound arrives all the same, carrying the modern world across a place that seemed far from it. This is one of the strangest truths about quiet landscapes. The thing that breaks them may never touch the ground. A road has a location. A building has an outline. A parking lot. A lodge. A trailhead. A power line. All of these can be seen, mapped, and argued over. But the sky is harder to think of as infrastructure. It appears empty even when it is used. It appears wild even when it has become a root. The ear knows what the eye does not show. In the Grand Canyon, this contradiction becomes almost impossible to ignore. Visually, the canyon seems to belong to deep time. Its walls hold layers of rock older than human history, older than cities, older than the languages in which visitors try to describe it. At dawn or evening, light moves slowly across the stone, and distance becomes almost too large for thought. Then an aircraft crosses that ancient space in minutes. Its engine does not erase the canyon, but it changes the way the canyon is experienced. The eye may still see vastness. The ear hears intrusion. The mind is pulled abruptly from geologic time into scheduled time. Tour time, transport time, the organized movement of modern life through air. The canyon remains, but the listening has changed. This is why the story of quiet cannot remain only a story of remote places. It has to become a story of vulnerability, the quiet of distance, the quiet of stone, the quiet of forest. All of them can seem protected by scale. A canyon looks too immense to disturb. A desert looks too empty to enter. A mountain basin looks too far away to belong to ordinary noise. Yet sound travels by paths that vision does not mark. A single aircraft can unite places that geography had separated. It can carry the same mechanical note over forests, ridges, rivers, deserts, and sacred sites. It can make the sky above a remote place feel connected to airports, fuel systems, tourism, military training, business routes, and distant cities. The quiet place is no longer alone. This does not mean that flight is simple to condemn. Aircraft carry people, supplies, emergency help, scientific instruments, and sometimes the only practical access across difficult terrain. Air tours allow some visitors to see landscapes they could never hike into. Modern life is full of trade-offs, and a documentary about quiet should not pretend that every sound has an easy moral label. But the experience of interruption remains real. When a plane passes overhead, the listener does not merely hear a machine. They hear a change in relationship. A place that had seemed to speak in its own voice is suddenly joined by a sound from elsewhere. The sound does not arise from the canyon wall, the river, the forest canopy, or the movement of animals. It arrives as an import. It belongs to a system outside the place. That is why aircraft noise can feel so different from thunder. Thunder may be startling, immense, even frightening, but it comes from the weather of the landscape itself. Wind may roar through a canyon with greater force than a small aircraft, but the wind is part of the air moving through the land. A waterfall can fill a valley with sound, yet it reveals the mountain's structure, slope, snowmelt, and gravity. A machine in the sky reveals reach. Human sound no longer has to wait for roads. It no longer has to move gradually from settlement into wilderness. It can appear over a place with no visible warning, pass through the quiet, and leave behind a feeling that the world is less remote than it seemed a moment before. This is why natural soundscape monitoring matters. To protect a quiet place, one must first admit that sound is part of the place, not an accessory, not a mood added by the visitor's imagination, not a luxury for people who dislike noise. Sound is one of the ways a landscape exists. It tells us where we are, what lives there, what moves there, what weather is present, and how deeply human systems have entered. A canyon is not only a view, it is also an acoustic space. A forest is not only trees, it is also the layered sound of rain, birds, insects, branches, and distance. A desert is not only an image of emptiness, it is also the long interval between sounds, the exposed movement of wind, the faint evidence of life crossing open ground. When human noise enters these places, it does not only add a sound, it changes what can be heard underneath. A footstep on a trail, a whispered conversation, a distant bird call, even a brief natural burst of wind may enter the soundscape and then settle back into it. A persistent mechanical sound behaves differently. It can cover other signals. It can make small things disappear. It can flatten the acoustic depth of a place. The quieter the landscape, the more noticeable the intrusion becomes. In a city, an aircraft may be only one layer among many. Traffic, voices, sirens, ventilation, construction, and electronics create a dense acoustic field. But over a canyon at dawn, or above a rainforest after rainfall, that same aircraft may become the main event. The less noise there is, the more power one sound has to reorganize attention. This is one of the paradoxes of quiet. The very qualities that make a place precious also make it vulnerable. In a loud environment, small changes may be hidden. In a quiet environment, nothing hides easily. A single engine can travel through attention like a line drawn across a blank page. The National Park Service has spent years treating this not as a poetic complaint, but as a matter of measurement and stewardship. Microphones can be placed in parks. Sound levels can be recorded. The sources of sound can be identified. Wind, birds, insects, water, vehicles, aircraft, generators, construction, visitor activity. Time can be measured not only by hours of daylight, but by how often a place is free from human-made noise. This turns quiet into something that can be studied. It also reveals how difficult quiet is to defend. A park boundary can limit certain activities on the ground. It can regulate roads, trails, visitor behavior, construction, and land use. But aircraft pass through another layer of decision-making. Airspace, commercial flights, sightseeing tours, military routes, and broader transportation systems may all affect the soundscape below. The landscape may be protected, but the air above it belongs to a more complicated world. The sky becomes the hidden road because it is hidden. People may not notice how much it changes their experience until they have heard what a place sounds like without it. A visitor who has never known a quiet canyon may accept aircraft as normal. A child who grows up beneath constant flight paths may not imagine that the sky could be acoustically empty. The loss of quiet can become invisible because each generation inherits a slightly louder baseline. This is how disappearance often works, not as a sudden catastrophe, but as a lowered expectation. A place becomes a little louder, then that loudness becomes ordinary. The next increase arrives on top of the new ordinary. Soon, what was once considered intrusion becomes background. The listener adapts, but adaptation is not the same as preservation. The canyon remembers another scale, even if we do not. Its walls were cut by water, wind, gravity, and time. Its silence, when it appears, does not feel young. It feels like something that has waited longer than any engine, longer than any visitor, longer than any argument over access and use. To hear that silence interrupted is to feel two histories collide. The slow history of stone and the fast history of machinery. The sound passes. The canyon remains. But for the listener, something has been revealed. Quiet is not merely found. It is allowed. It depends on restraint. And restraint is a choice made again and again by people, institutions, industries, visitors, pilots, planners, and governments. The question is not whether humans can enter quiet places. We always have. The question is whether we can enter without making ourselves the dominant sound. This question grows sharper in popular landscapes. The more people love a place, the more pressure it may receive. Roads are improved so more visitors can arrive. Flights increase so more people can see it from above. Facilities expand to meet demand. Tour buses idle. Parking lots fill. Trails grow crowded. Each action may seem reasonable on its own, but together they change the acoustic character of the place people came to experience. A protected landscape can be loved loudly. Love, when it becomes consumption, can become another form of intrusion. This is not only about national parks. It happens wherever quiet becomes attractive. Remote beaches, mountain retreats, desert camps, polar routes, rainforest lodges, scenic viewpoints. Even places advertised as peaceful can become less quiet through the very attention that celebrates them. There is a sadness in that, and also a warning. Quiet cannot be treated as an infinite backdrop. It is produced by conditions, and those conditions can be changed. Remove distance. Increase traffic. Open the sky to constant routes. Place machines at the edges. Bring speakers and engines into the center. And the quiet does not remain the same simply because the land still looks beautiful. This is why the ear may be more honest than the camera. A photograph can crop out the road. It can frame the canyon without the aircraft. It can show a person alone on a trail while a tour helicopter passes beyond the image. But the soundscape includes what the eye may prefer not to show. Listening makes hidden pressures harder to ignore. It also makes protection more complicated, because not every human sound is equally harmful, and not every quiet must be absolute. A park is not a museum of stillness. People speak, children laugh, rangers work, trails are maintained, emergency vehicles may be necessary. Indigenous communities and local residents may have relationships to the land that long predate modern tourism. Cultural sounds can also belong to a place. The goal is not a fantasy of a world without people. The goal is proportion. In the forest, quiet meant a living balance. In the desert, it meant space between sounds. In the crater, it meant scale. In the chamber, it meant control pushed so far that the body became audible. In protected landscapes, quiet means allowing the sounds of the place to remain intelligible. The question is not whether humans make sound. We do. The question is whether our sounds leave room for anything else. A canyon with no human sound at all may be rare, perhaps impossible for long. But a canyon where the river, wind, ravens, insects, falling stones, and human footsteps can still be heard in relation to one another is different from a canyon dominated by engines. The difference may not be visible. It may not be easy to put into a photograph or brochure, but the body knows it. The listener knows when a place can still speak. There is another reason this matters. Quiet places change how people behave. When the soundscape is delicate, many visitors instinctively lower their voices. Footsteps become slower. Attention becomes more careful. The place itself seems to guide conduct. But when a soundscape is already dominated by machines, people may become louder without noticing. The environment no longer asks for the same restraint. Noise teaches noise. Quiet teaches listening. This may be one of the deepest forms of loss. When quiet disappears, we lose not only the acoustic condition, but the behavior it made possible. We lose the habit of entering a place gently. We lose the patience to wait for small sounds. We lose the ability to recognize the difference between a landscape as scenery and a landscape as a living field of signals. The sky that breaks the silence interrupts more than a moment. It interrupts a way of paying attention. Yet the story should not end in complaint. The fact that sound can be measured means it can be considered. The fact that overflights can be mapped means routes can be discussed. The fact that natural soundscapes can be recorded means they can be compared, valued, and sometimes restored. Quiet may be fragile, but it is not imaginary. Once people learn to hear it, they can begin to defend it. In some places, management plans attempt to reduce aircraft noise. In others, quiet zones, visitor education, trail design, road limits, and soundscape monitoring can make a difference. None of these solutions returns the world to some untouched past. But they acknowledge that the acoustic life of a place deserves attention alongside its rocks, trees, animals, waters, and views. This is a turning point. Until now, we have searched for quiet as an experience, a room without echoes, a forest full of rain and life, a crater shaped by height and stone, a desert opened by distance. Now quiet becomes part of what places are, and part of what other beings depend on. The next question is larger than human comfort. When aircraft pass over a canyon, when roads hum beside a forest, when engines enter a desert night, people are not the only listeners. Birds, insects, mammals, reptiles, and countless hidden lives are reading the world through sound. For them, noise is not simply unpleasant. It may change what can be heard, and therefore what can be survived. Beneath the aircraft, beneath the human ear, beneath the scenic surface of protected landscapes, there is another listening world already at work. The animals have been listening all along. At dawn, before a human visitor has said a word, the forest is already full of messages. A bird in the canopy sings across its territory. Another answers from farther off, hidden behind leaves. Near a pond, frogs call from the damp edge of water, each voice joining and separating from the others. A bat returning late to shelter reads the last darkness through echoes too quick and fine for us to follow. An elk beyond the trees hears movement before a person on the trail has noticed anything at all. To us, a quiet place may feel like refuge. To many animals, it is information. This changes the meaning of quiet again. So far, we have followed quiet as a human experience. We have entered the chamber where sound dies, the forest where life speaks softly, the crater where land opens into stillness, the desert where distance stretches the space between sounds, and the canyon where a machine in the sky can cross an ancient silence. But the deeper we listen, the clearer it becomes that the human ear is not the only ear in the story. The world is full of listeners. Some listen through ears not so different from ours. Others listen through skin, bone, water, ground, air pressure, vibration, or organs tuned to signals we barely notice. For them, sound is not atmosphere added to life. It is part of life's working structure. It helps animals find mates, avoid predators, defend territory, locate food, coordinate movement, recognize offspring, and sense danger before danger appears. A soundscape is never only background. Researchers sometimes describe the acoustic world in three broad families. Geophony is the sound of the earth itself: wind, rain, thunder, rivers, waves, ice, shifting rock. Biophony is the sound of living creatures: birds, insects, frogs, mammals, fish, whales, and the countless signals produced by bodies in motion. Anthrophony is the sound humans add: engines, aircraft, roads, machines, construction, amplified voices, and the low mechanical layer of modern life. These words are useful, but the living scene matters more than the vocabulary. Imagine a forest at first light, before the sun fully reaches the ground. Birds begin placing their voices into the air. One calls from a branch above the trail. Another answers from deeper in the trees. Insects hold a thinner vibration near the understory. A stream moves steadily over stone. Wind touches the canopy, but does not dominate it. Each sound has a place. The forest is not merely making noise. It is organizing itself. Some animals call at certain hours because those hours carry sound better or reduce competition from other voices. Some songs occupy certain pitches, leaving room for other species above or below them. Some calls are brief because a longer sound might reveal too much. Others repeat because repetition is the message. To human ears, this can feel peaceful. To the animals, it may be urgent. A bird's song can be a claim. This is my territory. I am here. Stay away. Come closer. I am strong enough to sing. A frog's call can become part of a chorus where timing matters. An insect's vibration can announce readiness, presence, or warning. The forest may sound delicate, but beneath that delicacy is a constant negotiation of survival. Quiet allows those signals to remain clear. When human noise enters, it does not need to be louder than everything else to matter. It only needs to cover the wrong signal at the wrong moment. A road near a breeding site can blur a mating call. An aircraft overhead can interrupt a warning. A generator can fill the low frequencies where certain animals communicate. A boat engine can make water that once carried information become acoustically crowded. This is masking. The idea is simple. One sound makes another harder to hear. In human life, we know this without needing science. A conversation disappears beside a passing truck. A phone call becomes difficult in a crowded station. A soft voice is swallowed by music in another room. The sound is still there, but it is hidden under something stronger, broader, or more persistent. Animals live inside that problem with higher stakes. For a bird, a masked call may mean a mate does not answer. For prey, a masked warning may mean danger arrives too late. For a predator, a masked rustle may mean a meal is missed. For a parent, a masked signal may mean a young animal is harder to locate. What humans describe as noise pollution can become, for other species, a change in the rules of the world. The land may look unchanged. A forest beside a road can still be green. A meadow beneath a flight path can still bloom. A canyon crossed by aircraft can still look ancient from the rim. But if the acoustic world has changed, the place itself has changed. The eye may see habitat while the ear hears interference. This is one of the quietest forms of environmental damage. It leaves no obvious scar. No tree falls. No river turns visibly dark. No mountain is cut open in the moment a plane passes overhead. Yet for a few seconds, or minutes, or repeated hours across a day, the listening world is altered. Signals must compete. Attention shifts. Some animals pause. Others call louder, change timing, move away, or spend more energy communicating than before. A sound can become a pressure. It can make life more costly. This does not mean all animals react in the same way. Some species are flexible. Some adapt to human sound by changing pitch, volume, rhythm, or timing. Some birds in cities sing differently than relatives in quieter habitats. Some animals grow accustomed to certain repeated noises. Others avoid noisy areas. Even if the visible habitat seems suitable, adaptation, though, is not always recovery. To adapt can mean to spend more energy. It can mean to call louder, listen harder, shift behavior, or occupy a smaller part of the day. It can mean that only the more flexible species remain while more sensitive species fade from the soundscape. A place can grow louder and still be inhabited, but the community of listeners may slowly change. The soundscape records these changes in ways a casual visitor may miss. A forest, after long exposure to noise, may not become silent. It may still contain birds, insects, wind, and water. But the balance may be different. Some voices may be absent. Some intervals may feel strangely empty. Some species may have moved deeper into quieter areas. If quieter areas still exist. A wetland gives another example. At dusk, frogs gather sound around water. Their calls may seem like a single shimmering layer, but the chorus is made of individuals, timing themselves in relation to one another. The pauses matter. The rhythms matter. The ability to hear and answer matters. If traffic rises nearby, or engines pass repeatedly, the chorus may be forced to compete with a sound that has nothing to do with water, season, or mating. The wetland may still look beautiful, but its acoustic life has become harder work. A bat in the night faces a different kind of listening. It sends sound outward and reads the returning echoes. The world arrives back as information: wing, branch, insect, opening, obstacle. To a human standing below, the night may seem quiet. To the bat, it is a field of returning signals, a darkness mapped in pulses. Now imagine that darkness filled with sudden mechanical disturbance. The bat's life is not a poetic symbol of listening. It is listening made practical. A small error can matter. A confusing soundscape can alter how animals move, feed, or avoid danger. The more closely one follows these lives, the harder it becomes to treat quiet as a private human luxury. Natural quiet is habitat. It is not separate from trees, soil, water, and air. It is one of the conditions that allows those visible parts of nature to function. A quiet wetland, a quiet forest interior, a quiet desert night, a quiet canyon. Each one gives animals the acoustic space to send and receive the signals their lives depend on. Night makes this especially clear. When light fades, sound often becomes more important. Animals that hide by day move through grass, branches, and open ground. Owls listen for small mammals. Bats read echoes. Insects produce choruses that rise and fall with temperature. Coyotes call across distance. Frogs gather their voices around water. Small feet cross soil. Leaf litter, snow, or sand. For humans, night quiet can feel like rest. For many animals, it is a working hour. Darkness is not empty. It is active, alert, and full of exchange. A quiet night allows signals to travel. It gives the hunter a chance to hear the hunted, and the hunted a chance to hear the hunter. It lets calls cross water and meadow. It lets each creature locate itself in relation to others. Now imagine a road running beside that night. The headlights may pass quickly, but the sound spreads. Tires on pavement, engines climbing, brakes, distant acceleration. The low, constant wash of traffic, even when individual vehicles blur into one continuous band. To a human indoors, it may become background. To the animals outside, it may become a new acoustic weather that never fully clears. The world does not have to be loud to be altered. A persistent low sound can be as important as a sudden high one. A faint highway can fill the frequencies where certain signals travel. A repeated aircraft route can interrupt otherwise quiet intervals. A seasonal increase in tourism can change the acoustic character of breeding, nesting, feeding, or migration periods. This is why protected areas are not automatically protected soundscapes. A boundary on a map may keep out some forms of development. But sound moves through air with less respect for lines. Roads along the edge of a park may enter the listening space inside it. Aircraft overhead may affect valleys far below. Human activity outside a reserve can become part of life within it. For animals, the park boundary may not be the boundary of disturbance. The acoustic boundary is wider, softer, harder to see, and often harder to manage. There is also a deeper emotional shift here. Once we understand animals as listeners, the quietest places on Earth no longer seem like settings arranged for human restoration. They become shared acoustic worlds. The human visitor is not the only one seeking relief from noise. The human visitor is entering a place where countless beings are already using sound with precision. To walk quietly through such a place is not only polite, it is a form of participation. The careful footstep, the lowered voice, the willingness not to bring music onto a trail, the decision to let a forest sound like itself. These are small acts. They do not solve aircraft noise or highway expansion. They do not restore every altered soundscape. But they recognize that listening is not private. Every sound we add enters a field already occupied by others. That recognition can change the way a place feels. A bird call is no longer simply beautiful. It is a message sent into contested air. A frog chorus is no longer merely atmospheric. It is a collective signal shaped by timing, water, temperature, and risk. The hum of insects is no longer a vague summer sound. It is a living layer, one part of the biophony that tells the ecosystem is awake. Even pauses become more populated. The interval between calls matters. The sudden absence of a sound can matter. An animal may stop because a predator moves nearby, because weather has shifted, because a human has entered, or because a machine has covered the signal it was waiting for. Silence in nature is not always calm. Sometimes it is attention. This is why the search for quiet becomes more serious as it moves beyond the human self. In the chamber, quiet revealed the body. In the forest, quiet revealed life. In the desert, quiet revealed distance. In protected landscapes, quiet revealed vulnerability. Through animals, quiet reveals dependence. It becomes the condition that lets living things hear one another and be heard. The earth is never truly silent. It should not be. A silent forest would not be a healthy forest. A silent wetland would be a warning, not a refuge. A silent desert night might mean that something living has vanished. What we are searching for is not the removal of all sound, but the protection of relationships among sounds. A clear soundscape allows wind, water, animals, and human presence to exist without one layer erasing all the others. Wind can move. Water can speak. Animals can call. People can pass through without becoming the only thing heard. The place remains legible to its inhabitants. That word matters. Legible. A soundscape is something animals read, not with language, but with bodies trained by evolution to notice pattern, distance, rhythm, pitch, repetition, and change. To make the world louder in the wrong ways is to smudge part of that text. The page is still there. The letters may still exist, but the meaning becomes harder to recover. For human beings, this should create humility. We often enter quiet landscapes as though silence belongs to us once we find it. We say we want peace, rest, escape, solitude. Those desires are real. But the quiet was already in use. It was carrying messages before we arrived. It was holding the practical music of survival. To hear that is to become less central in the scene. And perhaps that is one of quiet's greatest gifts. it does not merely calm the listener. It places the listener back inside a larger community of attention. The world is not a stage waiting for human reflection. It is full of beings perceiving, responding, adjusting, and listening beneath our notice. The animals have been listening all along. Some listen from branches, some from burrows, some from water, some from night air, some through frequencies too high or too low for us to hear. Some listen across distances that would mean little to human ears. And some rely on vibrations so subtle that our ordinary idea of sound becomes too narrow. This is where the story begins to move toward the sea. On land, sound travels through air, leaf, stone, snow, and open distance. It can be blocked by ridges, softened by moss, scattered by trees, or carried along canyon walls. But beneath the surface of the ocean, sound enters another world entirely. It travels differently there. It can move far through water. It can guide animals through darkness where sight fails. Many people imagine the deep ocean as quiet because it is dark. But darkness is not silence. Below the waves, life has built another listening world, vast and old, filled with storms, ice, whales, fish, shifting pressure, and now the spreading machinery of human activity. To follow quiet any farther, we have to leave the land behind and descend into a place where sound may matter even more than light. The ocean was never silent. Many people imagine the deep ocean as a place of silence. It is easy to understand why. From the surface, the sea often looks like a boundary. Light breaks on it. Waves fold over it. Beneath that moving skin, the mind pictures darkness, pressure, and a kind of enormous stillness. The deeper the water goes, the more silent it seems in imagination. But darkness is not silence. Under the surface, the ocean is a world of sound. Waves strike coastlines and roll across open water. Storms press their force into the sea. Ice cracks, shifts, grinds, and breaks. Rain falls onto the surface in countless small impacts. Fish produce knocks, pulses, hums, and clicks. Whales send long calls through blue distance. Even the movement of pressure, current, and life gives the water an acoustic presence. The sea has always been listening. On land, sound travels through air, and air often weakens it quickly. Trees scatter it, hills block it, buildings reflect it. Distance thins it, but underwater, sound can travel far, sometimes much farther than sight. In a place where light fades quickly, sound becomes a way of knowing what lies beyond the visible world. The ocean is acoustic. This changes the story once again. In the chamber, quiet was built by removing echoes. In the forest, it was the balance of living sounds. In snow, crater, cave, and desert, it came through geography, distance, and texture. Among animals on land, it became a condition for survival. Beneath the sea, the question grows stranger. A whale does not live in a visual world the way a human does on a clear day. Water limits sight. Darkness begins not far below the surface. And in the deep ocean, sunlight disappears entirely. Yet sound can move through water with remarkable reach. A call can travel across distances that would make a visual signal impossible. For marine animals, sound is not background. It is contact. A whale's call may help maintain connection across open water. A dolphin's clicks can help map surroundings and locate prey. Fish may use sound in courtship, territory, alarm, or group behavior. Some animals listen for reefs, currents, predators, prey, or the presence of others. The ocean soundscape is not decoration. It is part of how life finds its way. This is why the phrase quiet ocean can mislead us. A healthy ocean is not silent. It should not be silent. It should contain waves, animals, shifting ice, storms, and the rough music of water moving against itself. A silent sea would be more frightening than a sounding one. It would suggest absence, not peace. What matters is whether its natural signals can still travel clearly. For most of human history, the ocean's loudest forces were not human. Storms could fill the water with violence. Ice could crack and thunder. Waves could pound reefs and cliffs. Earthquakes could send low energy through the sea. Animals could fill certain places with calls, snaps, clicks, and choruses. The ocean was never a quiet cathedral. It was alive with physical and biological sound. But these sounds belonged to the ocean's own systems. Then human machinery entered. Ships crossed the water with engines, propellers, and low-frequency noise that could travel far. Sonar sent powerful signals into the sea. Seismic surveys used repeated blasts of sound to search beneath the ocean floor. Offshore construction, drilling, pile driving, military activity, and industrial work added new layers to the underwater world. The ocean did not become loud all at once. It changed by accumulation. One ship became many. One route became a network. One harbor expanded. One offshore project became part of a larger industrial frontier. The sea, which had once seemed too vast to be altered by ordinary human activity, began to carry our noise across its distances. This is one of the most unsettling discoveries in the search for quiet. Human sound does not end at the shoreline. The coast may feel like a threshold, a place where cities stop and the wild sea begins. But sound crosses that threshold easily. Engines move through water. Construction sends vibration through sediment and current. Shipping lanes become acoustic roads. The surface may look open and natural while below it. The listening world is threaded with machinery. Again, the eye can be reassured too quickly. A photograph of the ocean may show blue emptiness. No traffic lights. No wires. No buildings. No roads. But underwater, the routes are there. They are not marked by asphalt. They are marked by repeated sound. For marine life, this can matter deeply. If an animal depends on sound to locate others, avoid danger, find food, or navigate, then added noise can change what is possible. A signal that once traveled clearly may be masked. A call may need to be repeated or changed. A quiet interval may be shortened. A place once useful for feeding, resting, breeding, or migration may become acoustically stressful. The animal may still be there, but the world it hears has changed. This is similar to what happens on land. Yet the ocean gives the problem a different scale. Underwater sound can spread through vast volumes. A noise source may affect animals far from the place where it began. And because much of this happens below the surface, it often remains outside ordinary human awareness. We hear the sea at the beach. We do not hear the sea as a whale hears it. That gap matters. Human beings are visual animals, and we tend to protect what we can see. Coral bleaching alarms us because color changes. Oil slicks disturb us because the surface darkens. Plastic waste shocks us because it appears in photographs. Underwater noise is harder to picture. It leaves no obvious stain. It does not float in a net. It passes, spreads, overlaps, and often vanishes from human attention before its effects are understood. But for a listening animal, sound is not invisible. It is the environment itself. Imagine a whale moving through deep water. There is no wall, no tree, no landmark in the ordinary human sense. There are gradients of temperature, pressure, current, depth, and sound. There are distant calls, echoes from the shape of the seafloor, the movement of prey, the noise of weather above, the presence of others. The world is not empty. It is read through signals. Now imagine a low mechanical layer entering that world. It does not need to erase every natural sound. It only needs to reduce the clarity of some of them. A distant call becomes harder to detect. The range of communication shrinks. A path through water becomes less legible. The animal may alter its route, change its calling behavior, stop calling, move away, or endure the disturbance because there is nowhere better to go. Noise becomes a form of occupation. It takes space without occupying it visually. This is why the ocean belongs near the end of the journey. It widens everything we have learned. The chamber showed that silence reveals the body. The forest showed that quiet can be alive. The desert showed that distance can be heard. The sky showed that human noise can cross places without touching them. Animals showed that listening is survival. The ocean gathers all of these discoveries and makes them vast. It is vulnerable precisely because it seems so open. It is full of sound, yet threatened by noise. It seems remote, yet carries human activity across enormous distances. It hides disturbance beneath a surface that often still looks beautiful. The old idea of quiet as emptiness cannot survive here. If we searched for silence in the sea, we would misunderstand the sea. What we should hope for is an ocean where natural sound can still function. Waves should speak. Ice should crack. Fish should pulse and hum. Whales should call through distance and be answered. Storms should enter the water as weather, not as confusion that life can no longer sort. Quiet. Here means acoustic space. Space for calls to travel. Space for animals to listen. Space for the living ocean to remain legible to itself. There is something humbling about that thought. On land, we often imagine quiet as something we seek for our own rest. We want to break from traffic, voices, alerts, engines, and the constant insistence of modern life. But in the ocean, quiet is not primarily a luxury. It is one of the conditions through which life continues. The sea does not need muteness. It needs balance, and balance is harder to preserve than emptiness. Emptiness can be imagined as a simple absence. Balance requires relationship. It asks which sounds belong, which sounds dominate, which sounds travel too far, which sounds arrive too often, and which sounds prevent other signals from being heard. This returns us to the documentary's central question in a deeper form. If the quietest places on Earth are never truly silent, then what are we searching for when we search for quiet? The answer can no longer be mere soundlessness. The quietest chamber was not empty because the body was still there. The quietest forest was not empty because life was still speaking. The quietest desert was not empty because distance gave small sound space. The quietest ocean would not be empty either. It would be a place where natural signals still had room to move. The search for quiet has become a search for right relationship among sounds. That relationship is fragile. A ship passes. A sonar pulse travels. A construction project begins. A drilling operation expands. A shipping lane grows busier. Each action may have reasons behind it. Transport, trade, defense, energy, development, research, convenience. Human life is complicated, and the ocean has long carried human need. But the acoustic cost is often paid by creatures that never agreed to enter our systems. They only hear them arrive. This does not mean human use of the ocean must disappear. It means that listening has to become part of responsibility. Routes can be studied. Technologies can be quieter. Timing can matter. Sensitive habitats can be considered. Noise can be measured, managed, reduced, and sometimes avoided. The first step is simply to understand that the underwater world is not empty space. It is occupied by listeners. Once that is understood, the sea becomes less distant, not smaller, not less mysterious, but less available to our ignorance. The waves at the surface are no longer just scenery. They are the roof of a vast acoustic world beneath us, one in which every engine, every pulse, every repeated industrial sound may travel into the lives of animals we rarely see. The ocean asks us to imagine listening without light. It asks us to imagine distance without horizon, communication without speech, navigation without roads, and community without visible gathering. It asks us to take seriously a form of perception that is older than our machines and often more vulnerable to them. There is beauty in that, and also unease. A whale calling through dark water may seem like one of the loneliest images on Earth, but perhaps that loneliness belongs more to human imagination than to the whale. The call is not loneliness if it is answered. It is connection. It is presence extended through water. It is a life reaching across distance by sound. The tragedy begins when the answer is harder to hear. That is the quiet we should worry about. Not the absence of all sound, but the absence created when meaningful sound is covered, shortened, or lost. A louder ocean can produce a deeper kind of silence, a silence of missed signals, broken contact, and lives pushed out of acoustic relation. This is the final complication before the journey turns toward its conclusion. Quiet is not always what we think it is. Noise is not only what hurts the human ear. A place can be loud with life and still be healthy. A place can sound calm to us and still be disturbed in frequencies we barely notice. A place can look untouched and yet be acoustically altered. The ocean teaches humility because it reminds us how little of Earth's listening we actually share. We stand at the shore and hear waves. Beneath them, other worlds are hearing more. Pressure, distance, bodies, danger, weather, route, call, reply. Their quiet is not our quiet, but it is connected to us now. Because our sounds travel farther than our attention. So the search that began in a sealed room has reached the open sea. It began with a human body hearing itself in engineered silence. It moved through forests, snow, stone, deserts, skies, and animal lives. Now it has entered a place where sound may matter more than sight, and where the idea of silence finally falls away. The earth is not silent. It never was. The question is whether its sounds can still be heard in their own proportions. Whether the body, the forest, the canyon, the desert, the animal, and the ocean can continue to speak beneath the human noise spreading across them. And that question leads back, quietly, to us. Not to the self enclosed in the anechoic chamber, but to the listening self moving through a louder age. If quiet is a condition that allows the world to remain audible, then the final question is no longer only where quiet exists. It is what quiet asks of us. At the end of the search, silence has become harder to name. It is no longer the empty room we may have imagined at the beginning. It is no longer simply the absence of traffic, voices, machines, and restless city sound. It has passed through chambers, forests, craters, snowfields, deserts, skies, animals, and oceans. And in each place it has changed form. The quietest places on Earth have not shown us a world without sound. They have shown us what happens when sound is given enough space to become meaningful. Not a blankness, not a perfect erasure, not the fantasy of a mute planet, but a condition in which the sounds of a place can remain clear enough to be heard in their own relationships. Breath in a sealed room, rain in a forest, wind across stone, insects in desert night, a bird call before dawn, a whale's voice crossing dark water. Quiet is the space that lets something be noticed. This is why the final question is not only where quiet places exist, it is what kind of relationship we are willing to have with them. Because quiet, as we have seen, is rarely protected by beauty alone. A canyon may look eternal and still be crossed by aircraft. A forest may look ancient and still be interrupted by distant roads. An ocean may look empty and still be threaded with engines below the surface. The eye can be reassured too easily. The ear asks for more honesty. To listen carefully is to discover that the modern world reaches farther than it appears to. It travels through roads that do not enter the frame, through aircraft that vanish into blue sky, through ships that leave only a line on the horizon, through generators hidden behind walls, through distant infrastructure we may never see. Human sound has become one of the most widespread signatures of human presence because it spreads invisibly. It can be easy to ignore. Quiet conservation begins with attention. Before people can protect quiet, they have to believe it is real enough to matter. They have to understand that a soundscape is not just decoration around a landscape. It is one of the ways a place lives. It is part of habitat, memory, orientation, rest, danger, migration, communication, and awe. A forest without its natural soundscape is not the same forest. A canyon where the river can no longer be heard beneath engines is not experienced in the same way. A reef where marine animals struggle to hear through human noise is not only visually threatened. A desert night filled with machinery has lost something that cannot be restored by darkness alone. Quiet asks us to take invisible things seriously. That is difficult, because many forms of modern life are built on not listening. We have learned to tolerate constant background noise because we have had to. We work through it, sleep beside it, raise children near it, travel inside it, and carry small machines that keep attention restless, even in rooms where no one speaks. The hum becomes normal. The interruption becomes normal. The absence of quiet becomes normal. Normal is not the same as harmless. The body knows this in ways we may not always admit. It knows the difference between a night broken by engines and a night shaped by rain. It knows the difference between a room where every appliance hums and a room where breath can slow. It knows the relief of stepping away from traffic into trees, or standing under a wide sky where nothing mechanical seems to be moving for a while. Quiet changes the listener. It softens the defensive posture of attention. It allows smaller signals to come forward. It gives thought more space between one impression and the next. It reminds us that the mind was not made only for response, alert, interruption, and speed. It was also made for noticing, waiting, orienting, and settling into the world. That is why quiet can feel restorative even when it is full of natural sound. A forest may be full of rain and birds. A shore may be full of waves. A night field may be full of insects. These places are quiet because they do not force the listener to defend against sound. Their sounds belong to a pattern older and wider than human urgency. They allow attention to unfold rather than tighten. The effort to protect quiet, then, does not have to mean protecting empty places from all human presence. That would be neither possible nor just. People have always lived with sound, made sound, sung, worked, traveled, gathered, and shaped their surroundings. Many landscapes that seem wild to outsiders are also cultural landscapes, with histories of indigenous presence, local use, ceremony, memory, and care. The question is not whether humans belong in the world. The question is how loudly we insist on being the center of it. Quiet asks for proportion. It asks whether our machines, routes, habits, technologies, and pleasures leave room for other sounds to continue. It asks whether a park can hold both visitors and birdsong, whether a canyon can be visited without being constantly overflown, whether a sea can carry trade without becoming an endless corridor of acoustic disturbance, whether a town can be alive without making rest impossible. These are not simple questions. They do not have one answer. A rescue aircraft, a scientific vessel, a community road, a cultural gathering, a child laughing on a trail. These cannot be treated the same as careless noise. The goal is discernment. It is the ability to ask what a sound is for, how often it occurs, how far it travels, what it covers, and who or what must live beneath it. Listening becomes a form of ethics, not a loud ethics, not a dramatic one, but a practical and patient one. It begins with noticing when our presence expands beyond our bodies. The music played from a speaker does not stay with the person who brings it. The engine does not stay with the road. The aircraft does not stay with the sky. The ship does not stay with the surface. Every sound enters a shared field. No sound is entirely private once it leaves us. This recognition can make small actions feel meaningful without pretending they are enough. Walking quietly through a forest does not solve global noise pollution. Choosing not to fly a drone over a nesting area does not restore every damaged habitat. Lowering one's voice in a canyon does not reroute commercial aircraft. But these acts train attention in the right direction. They teach the body not to dominate every place it enters. That matters because protection often begins as a habit before it becomes a policy. People protect what they know how to value. If visitors learn that a national park is not only a view, but a soundscape, they may move through it differently. If city planners understand that noise is not merely annoyance, but a condition shaping health and rest, they may design differently. If ocean industries measure the acoustic consequences of their work, they may reduce harm in ways that would otherwise remain invisible. Quiet needs imagination, science, and restraint together. Science can measure sound levels, map sources, compare intervals, and reveal what the ear alone may miss. Imagination can help us understand the lives of animals, the experience of future listeners, and the hidden dimensions of places we cannot fully enter. Restraint can turn knowledge into conduct. Without restraint, even knowledge becomes another form of noise. There is a reason organizations and researchers have begun speaking of quiet as something that can be identified, studied, certified, or protected. The language may be modern, but the need is old. Human beings have always searched for places where the world could be heard without overwhelming interference. Groves, caves, deserts, monasteries, mountains, shorelines, rooms at night, fields after snow. What has changed is not the need for quiet. What has changed is the reach of noise. A machine can now enter a soundscape from miles away. A flight path can cross a protected place without touching it. A shipping lane can change the acoustic world of animals below. A road at the edge of a reserve can alter the listening conditions within it. A speaker carried casually into a quiet place can change the experience for every person and creature nearby. This reach gives us responsibility. It also gives us a strange opportunity. If human sound can travel farther than our sight, then human care must travel farther too. We have to care not only about what we stand on, but about what our actions cross. The valley below, the air overhead, the water beyond the shore, the night around a campsite, the breeding season of animals we never see, the fragile interval before dawn when a place is not empty, but listening. Quiet asks us to widen the circle of consequence. It also asks us to become more patient with subtlety. Modern culture often rewards what is immediate, bright, loud, measurable, and shareable. Quiet resists that. It cannot always be photographed. It cannot always be proven in a single dramatic moment. It may appear only as a difference in how long a bird sings, how far a call travels, how deeply a person sleeps, how slowly a thought returns to itself. Some of the most important things are known by what they allow. Quiet allows restoration. It allows orientation. It allows creatures to communicate. It allows weather to be heard as weather and not as background beneath machines. It allows a person standing in a forest to realize that the world is detailed in ways ordinary noise has hidden. It allows Earth to become intimate again. Perhaps that is why the search for the quietest places ultimately leads back to ordinary life. Most people will never stand in a record-holding anechoic chamber. Many will never hear the deepest parts of a rainforest without aircraft, or walk alone across a desert basin before sunrise, or listen underwater where whales call through darkness. But everyone knows some version of noise, and everyone knows some longing for relief from it. Quiet does not have to be extreme to matter. A room at night can matter. A morning without engines can matter. A park where birds are audible can matter. A shoreline where waves are not buried under traffic can matter. A neighborhood designed with rest in mind can matter. The rare places of deep quiet teach us what to notice, but they also ask us to bring that noticing home. The quietest places are not only destinations, they are teachers. The chamber teaches that silence can turn us inward, toward the hidden sounds of the body. The forest teaches that quiet can be alive. The crater and cave teach that shape changes listening. The desert teaches that distance has acoustic depth. The canyon teaches that beauty is not enough to protect a soundscape. The animals teach that listening is survival. The ocean teaches that even the world beneath the waves is full of messages moving through darkness. Together, they ask for a different kind of humility. Not the humility of thinking humans are separate from nature, or that we should vanish from the world. Rather, the humility of understanding that we are one sound among many, and that our sound has become unusually powerful. We can drown out what we do not even know how to hear. We can also choose, sometimes, to make room. Making room may be the deepest meaning of quiet. Room for the body to settle. Room for the forest to speak. Room for stone, wind, rain, ice, insects, birds, frogs, elk, whales, and waves. room for other people to rest, room for the mind to stop bracing against constant intrusion, room for the world to be more than a surface we look at. When quiet returns, it often returns modestly. It may come after an engine fades beyond a ridge, after a plane passes and the sky slowly empties again, after visitors leave a trail and rain becomes audible in the leaves, after snow falls through the night and the morning street seems newly gentle, after a person finally stops speaking and hears how much was already present. There is a tenderness in that return. It reminds us that quiet is not guaranteed, but it is also not lost everywhere. It still gathers in protected forests, in high craters, in deserts far from roads, in caves, in winter fields, in parts of the ocean, and in small human choices. It may be fragile, but fragility is not the same as disappearance. What is fragile can still be cared for. So the search ends not with a final answer, but with a changed way of listening. The quietest place on earth is not simply a record, a destination, or a number on an instrument. It is a question we carry back into every soundscape we enter. What is being heard here? What is being covered? What would this place sound like if it were allowed to speak in its own proportion? And what would we have to change in ourselves and in the world we have built to hear it? In the end, the quietest places on earth do not lead us to nothing. They lead us back to sound. But sound changed by attention. A chamber without echoes reveals the private noise of the body. A rainforest reveals the soft architecture of life. Snow reveals how the world can muffle itself. A desert reveals the strange depth of distance. A canyon reveals how easily silence can be crossed by a single engine in the sky. And beneath the ocean, where many people imagine stillness, the planet keeps speaking in waves, storms, ice, whales, fish, pressure, and movement. Silence, if it exists at all, is never simple, more often. Quiet is a kind of clearing. It is the space that lets hidden things become audible. Perhaps that is why quiet can feel so necessary. It does not merely soothe us, it changes what we are able to notice. It reminds us that the world is not always asking to be louder. Sometimes it is asking us to become more careful listeners. So as this journey settles, and the sounds around you return, maybe the question is no longer where the quietest place on earth can be found. Maybe it is whether we can still recognize quiet when it arrives, whether we can protect it when it remains, and whether we can carry some part of that listening back into the louder rooms of our lives.